Hello, and welcome to another episode of Game Develop Repeat, the podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we as game developers can learn from it. I'm your host, Chris, a music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about The Elder Scrolls Morrowind. In this episode, we discuss open world game design, the idea of tourist attraction exploration versus wilderness exploration, and also player customization. Let's get to it. So, what is it about the Elder Scrolls Morrowind that makes it so unique and special and worth having a conversation about? What are those little details that stand out and place it above other RPGs in some aspect, in some interesting way that makes it really draw me in over and over and over? Why is it that even to this day, when there are other games that I could be playing, every once in a while I go, it might be fun. Maybe I can pop into Elder Scrolls, Morrowind, the old one, and mess around with it. Why does it still have that appeal? I think a lot of it comes down to a level of customization and the way that customization is executed improves the role-playing experience for me. I think that the way that they approach player customization is very interesting and a little even a little bit broken at times in ways that I'm okay with. I mean, if you've played an Elder Scrolls game, you know that you can basically just become a walking god on Earth and destroy anything that comes anywhere near you with the snap of your fingers. They are kind of a game where you can get overpowered. But there's something about Morrowind that is particularly um breakable. There's just so many strange things you can do with the character build, and the stats and the spells and the level of customization going on there. And the game almost invites you to do that very early on by giving you some very strange items, like this scroll of jumping that raises your acrobatics to just an insane number and makes the game go full on glitch mode trying to load new zones. Like if you use this scroll, your acrobatics goes to a number that the game basically can't even handle, and you take a jump and you just go zooming across the entire map, and then by the time you land, the spell is worn off and you die. But it is actually technically usable. You can use another scroll right before you land, and then you'll be able to travel very, very far. So it kind of invites you to learn these weird things that you can do to the game. But I'm getting slightly off track, because that's just too fun of a thing to talk about. And that's not out of the way, by the way. That is a very easy thing to run into in the game. They really put that in the path of your character. And they make it an interesting little piece of lore. Like you kind of see the guy fall out of the sky and land, and you're like, whoa, what happened to him? You check out the body, you find out, you read his journal entry. It's great. So it's got that kind of charm too. But let's get into the that's one of the ways they invite you to engage with this system. Let's talk about what this system is. One, there's a lot of like spell making and item enchanting that you can do. Two, there's a lot of ways that you can break your character's build in weird ways. You can The leveling system is a little too complex for me to try to explain within this, but let me give you the simplified version of it. Only some of your skills contribute to leveling up, but every skill that you get better at contributes to your stat increases once you do level up. So what you can do is you can allocate your skills carefully so that every time you level up, you get these massive stat boosts. Additionally, I believe the world scales with your level, not with your stats. So you can sort of accidentally make yourself really weak, or you can make yourself insanely powerful, depending on how you're doing your level ups. Um, every skill in the game increases based on your usage of the skill, which is pretty familiar. It's kind of the same in the later games. It's just how it interacts with your leveling and also the number of skills that you're doing this with. I do feel like the later games have really pared down the number of skills that you are interacting with. In this game, my favorite skill, my favorite thing to do when I play Morrowind, and I don't know if anybody else has this, I don't know why this is so exciting to me, but my favorite thing to do is to level up my acrobatics as fast as possible and then go to this one town where the buildings are pretty tightly clustered together and I just jump from building to building. It's like a little parkour simulator for me. I'm like, look, I can explore this whole town however I want. I can just jump from thing to thing. I'm obsessed with acrobatics in that game, and I don't know why. Other fun things, game is super easy to cheat in. There's a console button you can do to set your skills to whatever number you want. So you can just turn it into a sandbox. That's really nice. There's also the engine for this game is highly accessible and not insanely hard to learn. I did not sink my teeth into it when I was a child because I think I was in like middle school when I was first playing this game. My brother did go a little deeper on it. I did make a little custom race at one point that was just like overpowered. I was obsessed with the Dweemer in this game and I wanted to make my own little Dweemer character, so I did. And I gave like a special ability that was like rocket boots that were like a jumping thing, of course. Um, yeah, so there's all of these tools you can use to craft your own experience if you decide to dig deeper into it. And even if you don't, you can craft your own spells. You can craft your own gear, you can make potions, you can eat ingredients that you don't really know what they do, and you can like accidentally poison yourself in all these interesting ways. Like there's well, I say accidentally poison you. You can make potions that kill you, basically, is what I'm saying there. And you can explore the world in ways that I don't feel you quite get the same level of exploration in a lot of other games. And I think it's just it's like that extra 10% of freedom that really makes it stand out for me. Now, that's the customization side of things. That's the player control side of things. Let's talk about another huge aspect of this game, which is the exploration. This game invites you to explore in a variety of ways. And I think the most important one, and this is an odd, very specific thing to point out, but for me, this is the most important thing it does. It doesn't hook me into the story really aggressively. The base game does not give you a really aggressive story hook. At no point when I was playing this game did I feel like I was missing major story stuff. I never felt like, oh, I really should be saving the world. The opening of the story just feels like, hey, you should probably do this if you want, but like, you're a prisoner who just got off this ship. Like, we're counting on you to do this, I guess, but do your thing, and then you can just kind of run around. And I feel like as a kid, I didn't even really have full awareness of the main story. Like I didn't even bother with it. I just went off and explored the game. I never even messed with the main story. It did not hook me aggressively. I think later games in this series do hook you aggressively, and that is not to say that those are in any way inferior games. I like them a lot. I'm just pointing out what is special about this game. I could also do an episode pointing out what's special about any of the other games because they have their own particular charm as well. Um, so as far as this plot hook thing goes, it invited me to explore the main plot if I wanted to, but it also said, hey, it's not that big of a deal. You can just kind of go around and do whatever you want. Um, I don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but that's how it ended up feeling to me. I was just like, oh, I'm not stuck on this one path. Everything does not come to an end if I don't follow the main plot. So I can just explore and do whatever the heck I want. And boy, does that game have a world to explore. The Elder Scrolls feels, Morrowind specifically, feels so alien and bizarre and a little bit intimidating, but not to a degree that you can't handle it. Everything feels foreign. Everything feels like you are a stranger trying to get your footing. And you have to interact with these strange systems. You have to fly on these weird giant alien like bug monster things. Um, to get from town to town, or you have to walk long expanses and fight these weird little creatures, and sometimes you get a disease and you run into weird things on the road. I like that this game tucks away little secrets and gives you opportunities all over the place and is not afraid to let you break the game. I know I've talked about this in a previous episode where games will design in the ability to break the game. They will build themselves around the idea that players are going to break it, and we want them to be able to break it in ways that don't actually break it but are just like fun, are just enjoyable ways to mess with the mechanisms and play around and do whatever they want to do, because ultimately players get choices. Whether you want to or not, you're given the players choices. And I think this game does a good job of navigating that fact. Now, let's talk about what I'm going to call old school open world design. I think this is tied in with exploration. And what I mean by old school open world design is it is it is a little rougher around the edges in a lot of ways. There's a lot less guidance. So I think the most extreme version of this would be playing something like EverQuest, where you walk out into the wilds and it is like you just walked into the middle of a forest in real life without a compass. And you're just like, oh God, help. Somebody help. I'm going to die. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I am. And then you do die. And then you're like, do I even go and try to find my corpse? That's the EverQuest level of this kind of old school open world design. I think Morrowind does a version of this where it's like you don't really have a like mini map. You don't have like a map overlay. You don't have like a button to click to give you a path to go to your next quest. You don't have like stars on the map, right? You have to navigate. You have to ask for instructions from somebody. You have to follow signposts out in the world. And just heads up, I'm terrible at that. I'm very bad at following directions and dealing with navigating and all of this stuff. When I played Anarchy Online, there's like a fast travel system in that game. I couldn't navigate it. I couldn't figure it out. And it's like intended to be fairly understandable. I couldn't do it. So I'm not good with these things. Morrowind was fine. It's got all these signposts. If you follow the main roads, you're good, but you can also just wander off wherever and you'll be all right. I think the key to this really for me is it's just rough enough where you don't feel like this draw from point A to point B to point C to point, you don't feel this like this almost like you're on like a zip line that's just taking a lot of turns. You don't feel like you're just getting whipped from point to point to point to point. Like if anybody has played, I'm comparing this to a lot of MMOs, but if anybody's played a lot of World of Warcraft, there's this moment you reach. At least I always reach this moment. There's this moment you reach where you have 20 side quests and you're like, okay, I'm just going to clear another one of these, right? I'm just going to clear a couple more. And then as you're clearing them, you're getting more and you just feel like you're getting pulled from side quest to side quest to side quest. And it is helping you explore the world, yes, but you're not really paying attention to the world around you. You're paying attention to getting to the next quest. You're kind of lasered in. You're kind of doing that that thing where you can't see everything around you because you're focused on one point. I think that psychologically, something about the way that Morrowind designs its exploration system allows you to actually look and actually absorb the world around you, which I have a great appreciation for. And I fully understand why that is a difficult design philosophy. And I fully understand why it is more approachable in many, many, many cases to give people sort of like waypoints or spots to latch onto. And I think Breath of the Wild gives you that really, really well. They don't have the feeling of being pulled from one thing to another, yanked from one thing to another. Breath of the Wild is a very nice middle ground between this like point to point kind of philosophy of like, here's a quest marker, go here, go here, go here, and the Elder Scrolls Morrowind thing where there's like a lot of stuff to explore. But we've already talked about Breath of the Wild. um, so this old school philosophy, I'm gonna call it, appeals to me in a lot of ways, and there are elements of this that I don't like as much, and I do think it's difficult to pull off in a way that I really love. But I think it is so compelling to feel like you genuinely are exploring a world. It's so compelling to feel like you have genuine freedom within this world and can do whatever you want. And not having an excessively strong hook is a really interesting element of that. I know I mentioned that earlier, but not having really interesting plot hooks, really aggressive hooks, not having so many indicators that draw the player's behavior is interesting to me. And maybe we'll talk about that more in our next segment. But I do really like this idea of letting the player explore and sort of being confident that they will be able to find an interesting experience wherever they go. And you know what? I think we've covered what makes this game special. So let's talk about what we can learn. I mean, honestly, I could talk about what makes this game special for a very long time, but I think we've bitten off enough that it's time to chew on it a little bit and talk about what we can learn from this game. So, what different ways are there to invite players to explore your world? I am thinking of these two models that we kind of talked about, and I want to like formalize this just a little bit so it's easier to talk about. Um, I'm thinking of this as a spectrum between these two things, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other factors that I'm completely missing and not talking about here. But let's just keep it basic and go with what I can actually kind of think about. So here's the spectrum that I'm proposing. You've got on one side of this the tourist attraction model, and then on the other side you've got the wilderness model, right? So um, pure tourist attraction would be, here is a major point, go here, go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. Okay, I've checked out all 5 tourist attractions in this city. That is everything I wanted to see. And then you can buffer out a little bit from that. You can go to a tourist attraction, you go to this cool museum, and then you walk out and you go, oh hey, that's a cool looking restaurant over there, why don't we check that out? Right? Or you go, oh hey, that's an interesting I don't know, a clothing store. Why don't I check that place out? Oh, I could go for some paintings. There's a store nearby. I just finished at this museum, but hey, check out that art store. Or like maybe I want to buy some cool indie art, right? You you have that model. Um and so you can kind of push out towards more wilderness, more exploration, more checking out everything around the tourist attraction. And I think Breath of the Wild finds a beautiful balance between these things. And I think Morrowind, you can think of the major cities and the major plot points as these sort of tourist attractions, or the quests in the game too. You can think of those as the tourist attractions. And then there's the wilderness side of this in my mind. The wilderness side of this would be the equivalent of a kid wandering in the forest and just doing whatever the heck they want. This is old school Minecraft. This is Terraria. This is full on open world. This is Valheim, right? I mean, even with that, you've got a couple like quests, right? But Valheim is very, very open wilderness exploration. Um, this is the kind of thing where there's something interesting around every turn, and you can just keep exploring. Everywhere you go, there's something a little bit interesting, but there's nothing so interesting that it makes everything else boring. And I think that's what's fascinating to me, is that balance right there. If you put something too interesting in your game, does it make everything else boring? You know what I mean? Or if it's too easy to get to something super, super interesting, does it make everything else boring? Where is this balance? Do you want your plot hook to be so strong that the player can't resist it, right? There are so many games that are about saving the world. Is that too strong of a plot hook sometimes? Right? If it's really intense. For me, and I hate to speak negatively of any game. So let me preface this and make it very clear that I like this game and have spent a lot of hours into it. This is basically my only complaint about this game that like really sticks in my mind. The plot hook in Oblivion was way too strong, right? For my playstyle. This may not be the case for you at all. But the plot hook in Oblivion was so strong for me that it was a distraction from what I actually wanted to do, especially coming from Morrowind, which was a much weaker plot hook for me. So that interests me a lot. But within this exploration spectrum, so it's obviously it's interacting with your story, it's interacting with your side quests, it's interacting with everything in your game. But in this sort of spectrum, where is that balance and where does your game fall on that? And it's not that one side of this is good and the other side is bad. It's just what you're wanting to play. And knowing, okay, this is what I think is important. I think this is what's really important. Knowing what you're making and not confusing yourself and thinking that you are making a wilderness game when you're actually making a tourist attraction game. Tourist attractions are cool. Like I think they get a lot of bad press, but like tourist attractions are they're interesting, right? They're tourist attractions for a reason. People want to know about it. People want to see it. People want to check it out. And then the wilderness, some people do not like exploring the wilderness, let me tell you. Right? Like sometimes you go out on a hike and you're like, this is the worst thing ever. I hate this. It depends on the wilderness. So like if you are making a tourist attraction in your game, make sure that it functions as that. This is my thought. I have not designed an open world game. This is me thinking as a player and as somebody who has started making a little platformer, right? Like I don't know from an experience perspective, I don't know about this. Um and that is every once in a while, I think maybe I should start doing interviews on this show. Maybe I should start connecting to some actual experienced people so that I'm not just talking from this like player angle and so I can understand more of the industry. But I just think we're not at that point yet. Do know for the future that that is something that I'm open to. It is something I'm interested in, and something that could definitely happen one day. But at the moment, I'm not connected enough to the game dev community at large in order to find a consistent source of interviews. So that is definitely a future thing. I've gotten slightly off track once again. I do have one other question for the development section here. I think that pretty much finishes my like theory of exploration, and I'm sure there are different ways to invite players to explore, and you can use different sensory tricks too. Like, I think we think of this as a visual thing or as like a quest log trick, right? But you can absolutely do this through audio. You can do this so many different ways. Um, so just like open your mind to those possibilities. we're gonna we're gonna pass through that a little bit, and move on to our next question, which is, and this is a very difficult question for me to answer. I threw this down as a challenge to myself. What elements of Morrowind's design apply to absolutely tiny indie games? What can we take from this massive open world game, legendary, huge open world game, and realistically apply to a tiny, like, year or less solo developer game, right? I think the takeaway for me is to invite your players to engage with the game in a way that is enjoyable, and then make sure that if they don't engage in that way, there's still something enjoyable for them. And I think scaling that can be a little challenging, but I think it is possible within a small, tight game. I'm not saying make a giant, crazy open world thing where there's detail everywhere. That is the exact opposite of the lesson that I want to take away from this. I think the lesson I'm trying to take away is, if your game is intended to be one thing, try to play it different ways. And if those ways are viable, make sure that they're also entertaining. Build around the fact that people will have different play styles. Maybe build around the fact that somebody doesn't want to play your game straight through. Somebody doesn't want to go from level 1 straight to level 100. Somebody might want to just go, oh man, I love level 50. Let me just replay level 50 over and over and over and over and over, right? Allow your players a little replay button, right? Allow your players a level select menu. Allow your players some sort of choice over how they're engaging with the game. And if you're not allowing that choice, know that you're not allowing that choice, and make sure that you are designing in a way that kind of makes sense. Does that make sense? I think what I'm saying is, if there's a very easy way to give your player other ways to engage with your game, it might be beneficial. And if there is a way that you really don't want players to engage with your game because you think it will be game breaking, then it's probably good to discourage that. And um and game breaking, sorry, wait, I just realized this is really, really important to me. Game breaking does not mean that they are able to cut through the game and skip ahead or speed run or whatever. Game breaking to me means that there is no fun in the game anymore. A game breaking game design issue is not that somebody is able to speed through the game. That to me is just like somebody finding their own fun. A game design, in the same way that there are game breaking bugs, I think there are game breaking design issues. And a game breaking design issue is something that saps all of the fun out of the game and is so compelling that the player feels like they have to do it. Like, it's so compelling that the player's like, well, I got to play this way because it's just so much easier. But then they don't enjoy the game. That to me is trouble. And I know we've come a long way from what I was just talking about here, but I think that that is something that happens when we don't consider the different ways that a player is going to try to play the game. Like, if we consider the different angles of approach, then it's easier to find these game design bugs. For instance, in a game like one of the flaws of Morrowind is that I'm a min maxer, and I will sit down with a piece of paper and just really try to game the system, and it'll ruin the fun of the game, right? but it's kind of fine because I never started doing that until I had already played the game enough to where I was looking for more ways to engage with it. So I'm all right with that. Completionists, that's a style of gameplay, right? And that's like something we gotta look at. People who don't want to complete the game and just want to zoom through it. Um, Consider these different styles and then consider who you're making the game for. That I think is the lesson that a tiny, tiny indie game can take away from this huge, huge title of Morrowind. Very quickly, let's discuss what I've done in my development this week. The only real step forward was I have set a deadline for posting a demo of the game. That deadline is May 30th. So I'm going to post the demo and then I'm actually going to disappear on a vacation for like basically 2 weeks. And then I'll come back around and hopefully there'll be some feedback for me to go through. But there will be a demo of the game posted by May 30th on the Discord. It may be lacking a few features. There may be like a couple things that are just like not elegant or whatever, like some bad sound design, that sort of thing. However, there will be a demo, a 10 level demo. That is my goal, a 10 level demo by May the 30th. So you can look forward to that. I was unable to do any real development this week due to my personal life. But some weeks that happens and we just gotta ride it out. So that's what I'm doing. I'm riding it out. And then this coming week should be better. And I do have that deadline now as well. So that'll be interesting. Let's move on to the final section of the podcast where we talk about some sustainable habits. So, my sustainability tip this week is to make small changes to your process, experiment with your process, see how it can evolve. I say this because as a musician, I practiced the wrong way for pretty much forever and never made any progress with it because I was too stuck in my ways. As a programmer, I have noticed that when I make small changes, when I try new things, I end up finding so many opportunities to improve the way that I do what I'm doing. And I did learn this in music eventually. But when I was a young kid and kind of dumb, uh, not dumb, I'm sorry. When I was inexperienced and I was just being a little goof, and I mean me specifically, I don't mean that young kids are dumb. I mean that I was. But when I was not learning the lessons of life that I should have been learning, I did not alter my process as often as I should have. If you find something that works great, great. Just know that that doesn't mean that it is the best version. You can find something that works fantastically and it can still get better. Don't break it, don't just like chuck it against a wall and shatter your whole process if it works really well for you, but do like take a day, test something else out, see how well that works. Maybe you alternate between different methods of working depending on your mood. Maybe if you have a day where you're feeling low energy, this is the right process. And if you're high energy, this is the right process. I have different soundtracks that I listen to depending on my level of energy. There are different things you can do to adapt your process. Everything doesn't have to be rigid, firm, and infinitely stuck in one methodology. You don't have to stick to one methodology all the time. This is a reminder for myself. But you definitely, I definitely encourage the addition of variety to whatever it is that you do. Not to the degree that it is destabilizing, just to the degree that it is good for exploration, excuse me. Having said that, let's wrap this episode up. Last couple comments before we head out. I will have that demo posted on May 30th. It will also be in the show notes. It should be on every episode of the show. Including this one, if it functions the way that I am expecting it to. If not, it will be on every episode after May 30th, but I believe it'll go to every episode. Aside from that, if you have been on the Discord, you will notice it's still a very small community on the Discord, for the record, but feel free to join us. There is a new post in the resources section. I forget exactly what I named that channel. I think I called it resources. I'm not 100%, but there's a pinned post there, which is a consolidation of all the resources that have been given to me by listeners. Right now, it's one listener in particular, and then I threw a few resources that I'm a fan of. I will highlight the book Debugging by David J. Agans, Agans. That is one of my favorite resources for learning to debug. It's not specifically a computer science perspective. It's kind of more of an engineering perspective. But there's useful stuff like that if you want to check it out. And then feel free to rate the podcast. Honestly, it might have an impact. It might have more people watching the show. That would be cool. Or listening to the show. That would be cool. But also, this is sort of a side project for me to help me teach myself. So it's not a huge deal. If you get a chance, feel free to slap a rating on there or to pop into the Discord and give me some feedback. That is everything for this episode. So get out there, make some stuff, have fun with it, and just enjoy the whole creative process and enjoy some games. I will talk to you all next week. Have a good one.